Thank you. Thank you and namaste everyone. We are here again for monthly KSAS talk and we skipped January month because the whole team was very busy in KSAS Symposium 2025. We organized KSAS Symposium 2025 very well on 7 to 9 February this month, and Dr. Alex Hankey, who is the speaker of this KSAS talk, was in person in KSAS Symposium. Uh, Today's speaker is Professor Alex Hankey, who learned the Vedic science directly from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi Upanishad-style. He originated the perspective of science and philosophy of consciousness using critical phenomena, instability concepts from his PhD, the explanatory power of which is unique in several fields. He has published 130 plus articles in peer-reviewed scientific journal and several books chapters. He is on Stanford 2% list of top academics and the editorial board of 6 scientific journals, mostly in traditional, complementary, and integrative medicines. So today's topic of cases is explaining Ayurvedic biology in terms of science, life forces, system theory, and optimal regulation. In this talk, uh, we all know that Ayurveda is Upaveda, and in this presentation, he just want to explain how the new scientific account of life forces has become possible, how it agrees with the traditional principles, and with the system approaches to understanding of Ayurveda. So, without taking much more time, I would like to invite Professor Alex Hankey for this talk. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I must tell you that I hugely enjoyed my visit to Lucknow and the Kuru's School of Advanced Science. I was very inspired to see that you were working with teaching Ayurveda and particularly Ayurvedic biology, really Ayurveda Padartha taken from the Sutrasthana sections of the main Samhitas like Charak Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, and so on. And since I've been deeply involved in this field for my ever since 2001, I thought I should offer your wonderful director, Raj Kumar, a little of my accumulated wisdom. So I'm going to give you this talk explaining Ayurvedic biology, Ayurveda Padartha, in terms of science. Systems theory will be the first bit, the life force and optimal regulation, the second part, and maybe a little bit about health. I'm explaining this in 4 sections. I want to talk about my background work on systems theory and Tridosha, which many of you will be aware of. And I recently, today, this morning, I managed to find old PowerPoints that I had given in the year 2008, which contain the beginnings of my work on Tridosha and the theory of open systems applied to cells and organisms. And then I'm going to talk to you about my new sandwich model of biology, which is what enables us to fill in a missing scientific theory of Ayus, which is what Ayurveda calls the life force, known as vis vitalis in naturopathy, and really prana in yoga. A very general form of prana, which we would refer to as the life breath. And then in the discussion, I will show you how and why, which may have been obvious to you, this new, quote, sandwich model is the key to being able to understand further aspects of Ayurveda Padatta in terms of not ordinary modern science, but advanced modern science. So without more ado, let's see if we can get this to move forward. One slide. There we are. Okay, so my background was that I became extremely interested in Ayurveda after I heard my first lectures on it in 1985. And I went to India in 1988 for a course on Maharishi Ayurveda called the Pioneers Course. And we were given wonderful lectures. And I first met Dr. J.R. Raju, who was the director of the Maharishi Ayurveda Hospital in New Delhi for many years and now resides in Hyderabad, where I especially went to meet him earlier this year. Last year. It must have been in about April. And I got a clue. I was working at that time, not in science, but in lecturing on meditation, on Advaita Vedanta, and running weekend courses at various advanced centers on meditation in the United Kingdom, particularly one which was called the Maharishi European Siddhaland in Lancashire. And we were visited by quite frequently by people who we got to know well. And one of them was a lawyer from London called John Thomas. And I'd been asking myself, this was in the year 2000, 1993, how is it that something as fundamental as Tridosha could relate to modern science? At that time, there was not the smallest indication. Any scientist who had respect for modern science usually had contempt for the ancient Indian sciences, and they thought that something as very strange, seemingly strange as Tridosha must be complete nonsense. And all of a sudden, I had been asking myself since 1988 at this point, for about 4 years, what is it? How could we possibly understand Tridosha to be something fundamental in biology? And all of a sudden, this lawyer from London comes up to me and says, oh, I had a little thought last week, Alex. I saw this article, letter in the Times, and I thought you would be interested. Evidently, as we say, a little bird had whispered in his ear. This was, you see, this idea was not mine. It was a divine gift. I'm quite sure that it came through Guru Kripa, Devi Kripa. And John Thomas was the blessed messenger for this. And he said to me, every open system has 3 fundamental systems functions: input, output, turnover, or a throughput, if you're American, prefer that word, and storage. And I said, bingo, as metaphorically, bingo. That's just the clue I need. And this must have been in about April or May of 1992. And I spent most of the rest of the summer putting together a quite sophisticated theory of Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and combining together the 5 dosha prakar, what we call sub-doshas in English, of each, so that, well, I'll mention that a bit later. But it was instantly clear to me that Vata is input-output, Pitta, which relates to metabolism and to digestion, is concerned with throughput, and Kapha, which relates to lipids and what are they called? Glucose and all that lot. Carbohydrates. Kapha is to do with the storage of energy. And it's only when you have all these three well functioning and beautifully coordinated that a cell can function with sufficient organizing power to be, which I shall come back to, this concept of organizing power. It's only when that is working properly that you can have the cell building up more components and preparing to undergo mitosis and to turn into two new cells or whatever is needed, meiosis in higher organisms, so that sexual function and sexual recombination can create the next generation of plant or mushroom, fungus, whatever it is, possibly even an animal like you or me. So Tridosha, according to this, seems to correspond to the three basic systems functions: input, output, throughput, and storage in all organisms. And earlier today, I managed to access some of my earliest slides on this, and this was about the fifth or sixth slide in the sequence. I had put down a closed system with no arrows between the yellow circle and the outside, and then input and output, two arrows, one going in, the other coming out, as you can see, for an open system. And obviously, all living organisms have to be open systems. We, even if we don't respire, what's it called? In breath and out breath, rather than inspiration, which has a slightly different meaning, and expiration, which has a disastrous meaning. We inspire, but we hope a lot before we expire. And so you have input, output, feeding and excretion, drinking. Then you have digestion and metabolism, which builds up the structures needed to build the next organism, the next cell, whatever it is. So this is beginning to understand the three doshas. And so if tridosha is the way all the organisms regulate, input, output, throughput, and storage structure, then tridosha will apply to all organisms, and particularly through vata, it's generally believed, will concern regulation. So this is the way I envisaged explaining tridosha. And if you want to look at it for sophisticated organisms like ourselves, high up the tree of life, vata controls the input-output of water and nutrients through the output, particularly through apana vata. Pitta regulates digestion, particularly through patrika pitta and naranjaka pitta. And kapha regulates storage of energy through, partly through shleshika kapha. And when you look at the single cell functions, you see that vata concerns membrane transport, which of course is an absolutely fascinating, wonderful, and superbly regulated series of processes. And if you've studied single cells in detail, which I'm sure you will have done, then you will know that the way that nutrients are taken into cells and um, unwanted material or even proteins to digest um, potential nutrients in the external medium are extruded from cells. You'll know that membrane transport has an absolutely fascinating and central key role to play. And in nerve cells, you have this astonishing regulation of sodium and potassium ions. I think it's potassium that's particularly regulated. So membrane transport is absolutely central. And you notice, funnily enough, that it's Vata playing the central role. And when you look at the Panchavayus, prana is associated particularly with the brain and with brain function. So everything fits together in an extraordinarily beautiful way. And pitta, concerned with energy production, regulation, is the turnover aspect and the storage aspect, particularly of carbohydrates and lipids. But when you look at other things in the cells and all the things that have to be stored up and built up and copies of chromosomes produced in order for reproduction to take place, or even in bacteria, the bacterial DNA has to build up to a stage where the bacterium can undergo mitosis. So these things are incredibly sophisticated and central to the entire success of cell function and reproduction. So that is systems theory. Now, the next point we want to talk about are the life force and optimal regulation. So we apply what I call this new sandwich model of biology, which is depicted on the next slide, was developed with my associate dean, Professor Alex Hankey, and published in Integrative Biology for Integrative Medicine by the pair of us in the Journal of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine, a special supplement in 2023. And in this model, genetics supports the biochemical pathways from below, and the epigenetics regulates them all from above, as we shall see in a very sophisticated way. And we go to the next picture. So here is a rather poor schematic picture of the new sandwich model of biology. And you have the organism biochemical pathways, which involve thousands upon thousands of biochemical reactions. You have at least one biochemical reaction for each of the enzymes. And we know that even in a simple organism like Caenorhabdis elegans, the nematode worm, that you have something like, and doesn't it have 4 chromosomes, sex chromosome, 2 main chromosomes, and a tiny 4th chromosome, which has almost nothing on it. You find that there are thousands of enzymes produced, something like, I seem to remember, 15,000, and many of them are similar to the ones that we have in the human body. And the enzymes are produced, as is well understood, through molecular biology. And the enzymes, each one catalyzes a particular biochemical reaction. I distinguish between the enzymes and the polypeptide chains because a polypeptide chain can often be modified and incorporated into several enzymes, which explains why the number of enzymes is often far, far greater than the number of genes. And I think I'm right in saying that the number of enzymes in something like the human body still hasn't been categorically and definitively worked out. So the molecular biology model consists of this line, the bottom line, which actually, if I were to depict it properly, would go DNA, messenger RNA, which is translated into polypeptide chains, which combined into protein enzymes. And then you get all the other regulation through snRNA, whatever it is, sRNA, and other things. And the tRNAs are produced. And all this is traditional molecular biology that you will have had to learn about. And I hope you've survived. I'm speaking to the students, of course. But the interesting point is that it is all regulated. So I should explain to you a little bit about this regulation, which has got these two fabulous words connected to it, hormesis and fractal physiology. All right. Each biochemical reaction in the biochemical pathways is monitored. There are feedback loops which take the products, and if the level of the product goes down, then more of the enzyme is produced. And this feedback process is called hormesis. And there are something like, I'm going to mention this because it's a very condemning statement on the whole world of biology. There are about 2,700 or 2,600 papers published with hormesis in the title, and 29,000 mentioning, I got these figures recently off Google Scholar, 29,000 papers indexed in Google Scholar which mention the word hormesis. Yet when you look at, and it was discovered years ago, ages ago, around the year 2000, if I remember rightly, or earlier, much earlier. And the word hormesis does not occur in the standard textbook on biology, which is Campbell's Biology. It's simply not mentioned. And it's absolutely central to the ability of the cell to adapt and to be able to live successfully in different conditions. Hormesis is well known, as well established, to be connected to adaptation. So this tells you how absolutely hopeless the educational system is, that this process, which is central to a process of major importance, does not reach the biological textbooks. It's not taught in colleges or universities or high schools, for that matter, teaching biology. If I go to my department of biology in at MIT World Peace University, and I say to any faculty member, Mm. What is fractal physiology? They will say, never heard of it. And then I say, what is hormesis? Never heard of it. Now, there's 29,000 papers on hormesis, but on fractal physiology, there's more like 200,000. So, what are the educators in biology doing? Well, they're not doing as well as Raj Kumar, because Raj Kumar has introduced these topics. Bless him, God bless him. You've introduced these topics into the education of your students, and I very much hope that you will be able to retain these ideas, because I think they are central to biology, and that anyone learning Ayurvedic biology, Ayurveda Padata, and then being given some hint of how those concepts relate to modern science should have a little bit of the benefit of these new insights. And then you can say, KSAS leads the world in, or at least leads India practically, in biological education. So now let's move on. In this section, we've introduced the model, the new model. As I've pointed out, it has very interesting properties, but it's able to supply a scientific theory of the life force and also of health. I won't talk much about health. I shall be a bit vague about health today. But the theory of Ayus, which translates into life force, the critical instabilities that I mentioned in the previous slide, did I? I meant to. Maybe we'll talk about them in the next slide. The critical instabilities are all linked together by the various biochemical reactions to which hormesis applies. Each, how am I to put it? The process, the property of fractal physiology was shown in 1987. That's 37 years ago, nearly 40 years ago. The property of fractal physiology was shown to imply a property that was called self-organized criticality, i.e., there would be a critical instability, and somehow the critical instability would be, quote, self-organized. I hope I will be able to come and explain that a little bit later. But these critical instabilities, which, as I explained to you during my talk on consciousness, are absolutely central to the ability of an organism to have self-consciousness and self-awareness, these critical instabilities are all linked together by the various biochemical reactions to which hormesis applies. And if we look here, you see this is a biochemical pathway involving thousands of biochemical reactions. So hormesis and fractal physiology the instabilities are linked together by the various biochemical reactions. And this brings about a modern theory of Ayus, the life force. Now, the point about the life force is that all traditional medicine traditional understanding of biological organisms, particularly the ancient traditions, understood that there is an entity, something almost magical, that keeps an organism alive. And when we come to yogis and yoginis who have the power not very often, but occasionally, and very strikingly, to exit the body, and they can sometimes do it so they can return selectively. But if they choose, as did Paramahamsa Yogananda, to end their life voluntarily, they make a pact with Yama. And when Yama says, well, it's time for you to come with me, they go voluntarily, they exit the body. And the soul, God bless it, takes the life force with it. And as the soul exits, Ayus disappears, the body drops dead. The soul isn't dead, the person isn't dead, the person has exited. The person is very much alive, but he's in the next life because he's left, he or she, yoginis, have left this one. So how do you explain that? How can it be that there's one thing, a thing because we can think about it, one thing that is present in the physiology? When you remove it, the entire structure of the physiology collapses. And the answer is that because of the structure of hormesis presented in the previous section, the hormesis links all those regulatory processes together, each with a single critical point. The life force is, all these critical points are linked into a single, what we call multi-critical point. This is actually such advanced physics that most physicists can't understand it. So I'm only giving you the words without trying to without trying to explain the details. But you get a critical point of not higher order, as I proposed in my PhD thesis in 1972-73, but a critical point of very, 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 very high order, not 3, 4, and 5, 4, which we were dealing with in those days, but of a number equal to the number of biochemical reactions and the biochemical pathways. That means equal to the number of enzymes, which, as I told you, goes up from 10, 15,000 up to maybe 70,000 or more. So you're dealing with this unbelievably sophisticated, wonderful property, which was absolutely beyond the conception of any biologist in the 1930s, not beyond the conceptions of Ayurveda or yoga or naturopathy, which were all, and the entire Ayush systems, all strongly linked into the concept of the life force. But this multi-critical point has an absolutely massive organizing power, negative entropy, empowering it. Excuse me. So the vast power enables it to coordinate and organize all cellular activity. And should that organizing power be removed, it has a really significant negative entropy. And when you remove it, the system can't function. So the organism dies, whether it's a single cell or something as sophisticated as you and me. So what we've done here is to show that the new sandwich model, which sandwiches the biochemical reactions between the genetics and the epigenetics, is key to this new understanding of not only the systems theory, which I showed you in the first section, but to understanding the life force, the vis vitalis. And I haven't gone into the optimal regulation, but it's possible to show that there's a sense in which the critical points provide optimal regulation. I'll just talk about that for a moment. One of my close friends in the UK, who is a top professor at King's College London, gave his inaugural lecture, having been appointed professor of, well, really a professor in the field of epigenetics and he's particularly concerned with the effects of glyphosate, that horrible agricultural chemical produced originally by Monsanto, which ruined Monsanto and was taken over by Merck. And he is a great, probably the world's leading expert on the toxicology of glyphosate. And in 2000 and 2001, when I discovered he was working on epigenetics, I immediately realized that critical phenomena and critical points were going to be needed in order to make epigenetics work. When you have the switching, epigenetics are meant to switch genes on and off, but it's actually relatively rarely that they actually switch a gene off permanently. And when they do so, they actually produce major problems in organism function. And it's more usual that a gene is what is called upregulated or downregulated. And the processes of upregulation and downregulation are extremely subtle, and they are controlled by what I, in 2001, called critical regulation. You need to have a critical point to absolutely guarantee that you don't get any delay in the switching process, because if you get delays in the switching process, the inefficiencies will reflect on the health of the organism. So you have optimal regulation. Optimal regulation is produced by having critical points central to the entire switching process. And so when you want to switch something on or make something work in an organism, and particularly at the level of the brain as well, then the switching process is sited at a critical point. And actually, at a higher order critical point, so it can simultaneously regulate many, many things and ultimately everything. So our consciousness, as I pointed out in my lecture at KSAS, Kurua School of Advanced Sciences, our consciousness is actually sited at those critical points. And this gives a consciousness all its magic properties, as I pointed out, like self-awareness, self-consciousness, and the ability to collapse quantum wave functions. You may remember that mysterious phrase from my lecture of a week back or so. So the new sandwich model is a key to these developments, that you can have a scientific theory of the vis vitalis, the vis force vitalis of life, the life breath, if you like, or what Ayurveda calls Ayus, which is responsible for life and life length. And one of its great applications is to optimize the regulation of everything so that regulation is actually of optimal efficiency, most efficient. And immediately you see that, and you see that if you remove the life force with its negative entropy organizing power, then regulation will fall apart, not just be suboptimal, but practically dysfunctional. Obviously, the organism isn't going to be able to continue functioning. So you get this wonderfully self-consistent picture of how every organism, from the smallest bacterium or blue-green algae or any of the other many, many phylums of life, which are before the higher levels of life developed, before eukaryotic organisms developed. All of them have the property of optimal regulation produced by a life force which coordinates all their functioning and makes sure that they are living with life within them, organizing them. So Ayurveda's agreement with this picture actually validates the sandwich model to some extent. And the sandwich model provides a scientific theory that explains, to some extent, you'll be able to find things, many things I haven't explained. It explains the fundamentals of Ayurvedic biology, the Ayurveda Pipata, in terms of modern science, and modern science that would have been completely unimaginable to those rogues who so mistreated Indian wisdom, that arrogant villain, Lord Macaulay. And every time I go to my old college in Cambridge, I have to look at his picture in hall, and I want to take a sledgehammer and smash the glass and remove the canvas and shred it. And much the same could be said for his marble statue in the chapel. He was a jingoistic poet and politically incorrect person who should never be given any kind of I'm sorry to appear so rude about such a distinguished historic personage, but if Lord Macaulay would have had his way, there wouldn't be any Indian culture left. And as you and I and everyone here know well, Sanatana Dharma is the only thing that can really preserve the future of mankind. And if we can understand Ayurvedic biology better by doing what my Guru Maharishi Mahesh Yogi told me to do back in 1973, which was to create stronger links between science and the Vedic sciences, modern science and the Vedic sciences, then we will have brought East and West together, and we will have created a stronger understanding of the nature of life, the universe, and everything for our future generations. So thank you for your patience in listening to me. Our general conclusions. All students of Ayurveda, myself and everyone else, should take Ayurveda Paddhata very seriously. The fundamental concepts have profound scientific validity. Its picture of living organisms as holistic is correct. Don't listen to what anyone else says if they deny it. Ayurveda's concept of the life force, Ayus, is correct. Academics often imagine they know everything, but I can assure you that in biology, particularly, they have lots to learn from Ayurveda, and I shall be doing my best in future lectures to see that in biology, at any rate, academics take the opportunity to learn a lot more of life by virtue of having worked out something about the scientific understanding of Ayurveda Paddhata. So here is a picture of my guru, His Holiness Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, particularly for MIT World Peace University, founder of Maharishi's programs to create world peace. And I would like to finish with this little quote from Guru Gita: Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jaya Guru Deva. So thank you for listening. And that was an immense pleasure. I hope you also enjoyed it. Thank you, Raj Kumar, for the invitation. Thank you, Professor Alok, for the introduction. I was really overjoyed to be able to give you this little talk. And maybe we have some time for some questions. I'm sorry I've run over time.
Thank you, Dr. Hankey, and it was really great to listen you. And as initially in your bio, as I mentioned that you are the direct scholar of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and I am very fortunate that today even I am in Prayagraj and just visited the Samadhi-style of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi here in Narail, Prayagraj.
So you're in Prayagraj and
Yeah,
you have
I am in Prayagraj.
participated, you have had a swim in the Triveni.
Yeah.
I greatly admire you. I laud your efforts.
Thank you. And I request everyone, if there is any question, then open for discussion.
Raj put his hand up.
Yeah, please.
Very nice lecture, Dr. Hankey. I think we will have some more lecture on understanding more deeply to the Ayurvedic biology. We also have some research related to the herbs, and we found this homeostasis and the holistic treatment based on tulsi extract. So that was kind of eye-opening how biology works for me also particularly. But I have some question also for your presentation. You said no, hormesis. So
Hormesis.
yeah, hormesis is normally it is connected to autophagy, right? So
Connected to, I beg your pardon?
autophagy. Hormesis is connected to the autophagy, regulation of the autophagy. How the autophagy explained in Ayus or in Vata Pitta Kapha concept?
You know, could you, just because you have to remember that my foundation is in professional physics.
Mhm.
And when you mention a term like autophagy, I would like you to explain it just in 2 sentences. What is uh, AUTOPHAGY?
Yeah, so autophagy is a
Process?
yeah, it's a process by which cell breaks down, and normally they recycle old or damaged cell and abnormal parts, sometimes abnormal parts of the cells also.
Yes. Now, this is, it's presumably part of that normal process of cell death, which is induced and can be induced when an immune cell detects, for example, if an immune cell detects that a cell is becoming a cancer cell, it has the power to put in particular molecules into that cell which make the cell commit apoptosis. Is this autophagy?
Apoptosis is a programmed cell death, and autophagy is inside the cell. And what you are talking about attacking of uh, immune cell, that is macrophagy. It means the macrophage is another attack the disease cells. But the autophagy is something related to apoptosis at some point of time. But if suppose Golgi apparatus is not working very well, then the regulation process works such that it puts lot of mitochondria around that particular organism of the cells, and then
Organelle.
organelle of the cells, and then try to repair that in that process.
Now this is, you see, I'm so glad you bring this up, because what you've brought up is something that could be a long-term research question. It's not something that I have thought about. It's not something that I think can be answered instantaneously, because what we have to do first is to try and figure out the terms in which Ayurveda would express the process of autophagy. All
Okay.
right?
So yeah, that's why I asked this question, because when you explain connected input, output, throughput, and storage to Vata, Pitta, Kapha, there is no mention of this process inside the cell. It's only the
Of course, you're quite right. But then we're looking at these very simple first concepts. Now, if you then can move to my second level of explanation of the Tridosha, we have to go down to the, I mentioned the word dosha prakar in my lecture. We have to go down to what we call in English the sub-doshas. And I showed that you can link the subdoshas in the human organism and mammalian organisms, and really in most vertebrates, you can link them to the major subsystems of the cell. You have one subdosha triplet for the skin, and what is it that goes with the skin? The skin and joints, which includes Shleishmaka kapha. And then you have two subsystems for the digestive system. You have one subsystem with three subdoshas for the nervous system, and one for the circulatory system. Or at least that's how I remember it. I haven't looked at this for quite a long time in detail. But what then happens is that when you manage to put in the life force, then we develop a third level of understanding of Tridosha. And the life force has, for technical reasons connected to these critical points, the life force has got field-like properties. And Tridosha, by virtue of being connected to the life force, aspects of the life force, Tridosha actually develops field-like properties. And then we can say, if you have a field-like property for Apana Vata, Apana Vata is located preferably in the lower abdomen, whereas Prana Vata is obviously located in,
Yes.
also the brain, so that you can then start talking about the interactions between the different panchapranas. And as you probably know, if you have one of the panchapranas attacking another of the panchapranas, you get a disease like pranavrata samana vata vyadi, which is the vata vyadi, the neurological disease where prana attacks samana, pranavrata samana vata vyadi. And this turns out to correspond to Alzheimer's disease. Now, you can then work out between 10 and 20 different Vata Vyadis, and you can look at Charak Samhita or the other major what's it called? Sangraha. You can look at these great texts and see exactly what they tell you about the mechanics of these things. And that is going to be able to give us a way to understand how you go from the organism level to the single cell level, and how these things actually work out in a molecular level. But this is an immense body of research which remains to be done. Now, when you say, you then get feedback between the different, probably subdosha activities at the subcellular level, you then have to understand what you're trying to say in terms that would relate to Charak and Sushruta. And that requires a body of research in itself. So you've actually pointed out a question which opens up eons worth of really important research into understanding the depth of wisdom in the Samhitas. I mean, that's all I can say to you at the minute.
Okay.
Thank you.
Another question that is, if you have a multi-critical point of very, very high order, then entropy in that area is minimal, right?
Let me just think what you're saying.
Okay, so then what would happen?
No, you've actually, by talking about minimum entropy,
Yeah.
You are actually again saying something profound, because it's generally understood that in static systems, entropy becomes maximum. When you have a dynamic system, like a living organism, entropy is continuously increasing, as has been one of the great contributors to this subject was Erwin Schrödinger himself, when he wrote his famous little book called, what was it, The Secret of Life, or something like that. And the thing is that entropy production gets minimized. Entropy becomes maximum, but the rate of entropy production is minimized. And I think you're, when you say the entropy is minimum in some kind of way, you're also coming into that kind of process, because we're dealing with not a static, but a dynamic system where entropy is continuously increasing.
Yeah, so this is connected to, if your entropy is minimal according to your minimal multi-critical point concept, what would happen to the other part of the system where the outside the multi-critical point? And because normally if somewhere is entropy is decreasing, then it should be compensated by increase in entropy somewhere else on the same system. So that means the other part should be more disorganized. And in what Ayurveda say about this concept, that the other part of the cells, just take a single cell, for example, if entropy at those critical points is minimal, then other part of cells should be more disorganized. And that is the real form of life, or form of life will be organized.
There are two aspects to your question, which is very profound. When you're dealing with the single cell has hormesis apparently monitoring every single biochemical reaction. So nothing is left out of its organization. And it really is completely holistic and includes all cell functions. Nevertheless, when you look at a complex organism, and I think your this is very interesting. Your first example of autophagy seemed to imply that the function of an individual part of the cell, the organelle, the Golgi apparatus, I think you mentioned, that can be driven what we would call out of balance. And then the resuscitative organelles within the cell, you mentioned mitochondria, but I suspect that some other things might also perform similar roles because they are also mobile within the cytoplasm. The little places where protein synthesis takes place, they can all migrate around. And I should think that if a particular organelle required more proteins in order to restore its functioning, that the ribosomes also might cluster around, rather like you say that the mitochondria do. So the organizing power in a cell, you're pointing out, is even more sophisticated. And I'm very, very, very grateful to you. I really am, Rajkumar. The organizing power of a cell is far more sophisticated than just organizing its biochemical pathways. And you've pointed out the evidence for it, and I really can't thank you enough.
Thank you. Thank you.
Whether did any students have questions?
Is there any other question?
Hello. Hello.
Yes, Pankaj, please.
Just a small question, Dr. Hankey. It was a very nice presentation and intricate also. I mean, I didn't get whole the aspect. So just one question is is there any study related to the markers that are pointing out the specific natures like Vata, Pitta, or Kapha? Because we earlier tried for the same. So if you can suggest, it will be great, really great. Molecular marker or genetic marker, if any, known
Now, I
anywhere.
want to point something out. When you're dealing with disease, if you start from molecular biology, you are dealing with biochemicals. And then disease is meant to be flagged or assessed by whether a particular molecular system is within the correct range of functioning. So you choose a molecular marker for a particular process, and you then say, well, I want to decide whether you have diabetes or not. And the molecular marker for diabetes is glucose level in the bloodstream. I mean, I'm giving you this example because although I'm extremely ignorant in these things, this is one thing I can come back to. It's only an example. You could probably give me 100 examples, and I bow to your superior wisdom in each of them. But here is, you take whatever it's called, you take the level of blood sugar before a meal in the morning, and then you take postprandial blood sugar. All right?
Okay.
Now, when I look at Ayurveda, it tells us that there are basically three prakritis. But of course, you have combination prakritis, and some people say that you have 3 plus 6, and if you had samadosha, then that's a 10th. So you can be vata, vata pitta, pitta kapha, pitta kapha, kapha vata, or samadosha, and you get 10 prakritis.
Okay.
Now, each of those will have a different level, natural level of blood sugar. Clearly, someone who's chubby, which fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not particularly chubby, even though I put on a bit of weight on my tummy. Someone who is naturally kapha may be expected and allowed to have a higher level of blood sugar. They will naturally have a higher BMI. That's their normal functioning. And to put them into a slot as to whether they've got excessive BMI without allowing for their natural prakriti, and whether their blood sugar level is pathological without allowing for their particular prakriti, is a monumental mistake. And it's a mistake which every bloody hospital in every bloody country, including India, makes every hour of the day. Because they have not understood Ayurveda Padata, nor Ayurveda Prakriti. So these concepts are in desperate need. So if you're not going to use a molecular marker, what are you going to do? Well, the trouble is that people cannot measure Nadi Vigyan accurately and reliably enough. And we are in a time period where, in order to make Ayurveda not just a useful system of medicine, but actually to occupy what I believe is its rightful place as the absolutely foremost system of medicine for dealing with system imbalances leading to chronic disease, we have to do an awful lot of work. Look, we know that diabetes is known as madhumeha, and that someone who goes in the bushes, the ants absolutely cluster around the urine. And then when you look at prameha, which is what comes first according to the Shastras, you find that there are an absolutely astonishing number of pathways by which these imbalances set in. And each of them needs seriously detailed characterization. It's linking back to the 10 prakritis, to the diets, to the times of year, and then we come back to the wonderful wisdom that Ayurveda has about the dinacharya for each prakriti in each of the seasons, 6 seasons, if I remember rightly, in North India. Isn't it 6 seasons? Am I right?
Yes, yes.
I don't deal with this on a daily basis, so besides, at 77, my memory begins to get a bit vague. But you asked a beautiful question. It's very important. But just looking at molecules is not the answer, I promise you. And we have to, if I can motivate you to look into this deeply, send a paper to Annals of Ayurvedic Medicine demanding me as a referee, and I will absolutely give you the best of advice that is in my power. I'm rather a popular referee for Annals of Ayurvedic Medicine. They've just appointed me as a super reviewer.
Okay, nice. So it's like I have to change the angle. I mean, my perspective has to be a little more moderated, right? To see the
Yes.
thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you, Pankaj, and thank you, Dr. Hankey. I think there is no more question. Is there? Because we are running out of time. So, yeah, I think Professor Singh want to say something. Yes, sir, please.
Oh, I have very fundamental question and question your premise that Ayurveda is dealing only with biology. Why not physics? Why not physics? Actually, you answered the question about entropy, which is really mostly physics. What is the physics? What is the physics of Ayurveda? Let me lead you to that. By pranic urja, the pranic energy, is the source of life, which is urja is totally physics. So where do you place pranic energy as a part of physics and connection to the Ayurveda?
You know, you are pointing out something which fully confirms what I said. This is a very simplistic first attempt to relate Ayurveda to modern science. And you're quite right that there is very profound biophysics, and the concept of a critical point and a critical instability and a multi-critical point, they are very advanced concepts in physics. And it turns out that they do apply to biology. I never in the least suspected this in 1972-73 when I was awarded my PhD. It was inconceivable. It was completely beyond imagination. So, and we're used to dealing with biochemistry and neurochemistry, but life is a very deeply beautiful synthesis of really biology, chemistry, physics, and even when you get to understanding the intellect, a very beautiful advanced form of mathematics, which I've been able to discuss with sublimely brilliant mathematicians at a conference in Oxford last summer. So you're quite right. We shouldn't limit ourselves to biology. And what we're doing is just scratching the surface on something that I hope can open into a research program so great and so successful that India will be recognized as absolutely at the top of scientific understanding of, as I said before, life, the universe, and everything. Thank you for that really, really profound observation.
I still have remained my question. Where do you put pranic energy in your biology medicine?
There are two ways of answering them. One is to look at the nadis. And the most sophisticated aspect of the nadis is given in traditional Chinese medicine and the accounts of the acupuncture meridians. But then when you look at where the meridians originate, they originate in three power centers in the human body. One is in the head region. The second is in the heart region, and the third is in the pelvic region. But when you actually look at where the pranic energies and the meridians come from more precisely, you find that they're connected into the 7 chakras. And that ultimately all of life comes from spiritual energy, and that spiritual energy diffuses throughout the body in a perfectly functioning individual. But until the Sahasrara is active, then the person has to make do with the pranic energy that they have. And there is an instrument for understanding that pranic energy, which I would really strongly urge you to obtain if you can, and I can put you in contact with the supplier in India. It's produced by a famous Russian scientist in St. Petersburg called Konstantin Korotkov, Korotkov. And it measures the pranic energy in each organ and the qualities of the pranic energy in the different sectors of the human body. And it can give within about 30 seconds in the new form of the this machine, which is called the GDV, the galvanic discharge visualizer. Galvanic discharge visualizer. It can, the modern form, the up-to-date form is called BioWell. It can give you a measure of the energies in all the organs, energies in all the nadis, energies in all the chakras within a space of about 30 seconds. And it would be a wonderful machine to be able to begin to correlate much more precisely with our Ayurvedic understanding of what is going on in different states of health for different prakritis, and of different states of, that's arogya, in different prakritis, and different forms of rogya, disease, as the doshas go out of balance. I didn't talk about dosha imbalance, but this is the next stage of understanding the Ayurvedic biology of health, disease. And that was a very good question, Professor Balaram. Thank you very much.
Not done yet. Sorry.
You mean I'm not done or you're not done?
I won't let you be done unless I'm done. So,
you
what
mean
I'm saying, I mean,
you'll
there is
put
a,
me down, you'll put me into a biowell?
yes. Well, if that's how you want to think about it, I think I put you in the jail. So we can put that way also. But what I'm saying is there is another concept. I mean, a machine, I think that was Pankaj asking, how to do the monitoring of disease and Bath, Pitta, Cough. You could, of course, state some of this also, because Bath, Pitta, Cough will have different, not necessarily doshas, but in terms of the action metabolism. But my question is different. And this is related to your topic, because you're talking about explaining Ayurvedic biology in terms of science. And I want to see where, I mean, obviously you are a physicist and you would be the best person to address this. So, for example, there is a panchakosas. So there is a annamaya kos, there is a pranamaya kos, and then there is a manomaya kos. All you are explaining to me and to us is from your mind, which is manomaya. And maybe a Vigyanmaya, because you are a scientist of high caliber. The point is pranic energy at the plant level. So how do you address that? Where is the plant in you?
When I was teaching at the Yoga University, Swami Vivekananda Yoga Anusandhan Sansthan, the concept of the Panchakoshas was absolutely fundamental to the philosophy of illness and how to treat illness. And I even mentioned this at one stage during my stay with you in KSAS. On each hand, there are said to be 6 acupuncture meridians ending. And I think, can't remember the finger or thumb, which has 2 of them, but they are called the Jingwell points in Chinese acupuncture, and they end down usually on the inside side of the nail, or it could be the outside for the little finger. And I think there may be 2 on the thumb, giving you 6. And each is connected to a particular inner organ. And as long as the energies in the acupuncture meridians, the nadis, the pranic energy in the nadis, as long as that is healthy, which means not too much, not too little, it remains, quote, in balance, then that organ is healthy. Now, each of the nadis has a corresponding emotion, or emotion pair, which can block the nadi. And these are in the Manamaya kosha. So the Pranamaya kosha can be blocked by the emotions which correspond to emotionality in the personality, and it can block the emotions, can block particular nadis, acupuncture meridians. And that means that a particular emotion will have a negative influence on the inner organ, be it the gallbladder or the kidney or the pancreas or the heart. Heart is fed by love and is negatively impacted when you feel hatred for something. The kidney or the urinary bladder are impacted, one by anxiety and the other by fear. And if you are have anxiety neurosis, then you're going to get the negative impact on the appropriate organ. It's well known that when someone is suddenly faced by instant death, their fear may strike them to such an extent that they wet their pants. I mean, it's not just literature. It's a well-known, even in the West. The West doesn't have the explanation why, but Ayurveda and the Panchakoshas do. So you have the Manamaya Kosha. Now, if you develop wisdom, Vijnanamaya Kosha, then you can develop a level of balance of mind, mastery of the, what are they called? The yamas, mastery of the 5 yamas, the characteristics of wisdom. If you have that level of wisdom, it will protect your emotions from going out of balance and negatively impact your health. But it will prevent the emotions from negatively impacting your health. That is why yogis and yoginis are said to have a mastery of health to the extent of enjoying perfect health. And then, if you can get up to living permanently in the Anandamaya Kosha, you have, and presumably someone like Swami Vivekananda, being an Ananda name, was able to live in the balanced bliss which protected him completely from the emotions going out of balance. And my own guru, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, used to say there is a state of mind which is called Ananda Kan, because the level of bliss is so strong that nothing in this relative world could overshadow it. And then the yogi is able to completely master, without having to think about it, the kleshas, all the kleshas. And what are they called? Attraction and repulsion, raga and I can't get the word for the minute, but abhinivesha, which is the third, the fear of death, is the 5th of the kleshas. And as I said, if you haven't mastered abhinivesha, then when you are faced with instant death, it can have slightly unpleasant consequences. Fear. I mentioned it, fear. What's it called? Raga and Dvipa? No. Dvesha. Raga and Dvesha, aren't those the 3rd and 4th kleshas? And you need to get up to Ananda. You need to get up to the 5th, the Anandamaya Kosha, active continuously, in order to master or to understand and become open to the realizations of Vidya, which finally dispels the first klesha, avidya. Now, I put that in yogic terms only because I was trained to think about it in yogic terms. these terms from the Taittiriya Upanishad, if I remember rightly, the Panchakoshas. They're very, very, very profound. But how, I ask you, how can we give lectures about this in the West? They think one is nuts because one believes in Vata Pitta Kapha. At least one can explain that. But how do you explain Vidya as opposed to avidya to someone like Richard Dawkins? He might understand systems theory and a systems approach to organism function, but he's never going to have any idea of how to integrate the highest levels of wisdom. India is so far ahead of the rest of humanity. It's absolutely, and I say this to all your students, it's a crying need for each young student of Indian wisdom to learn to transmit these wonderful insights, understandings on a scientific level to the rest of the world. It's a huge, huge need. Thanks, Professor Balaram. Have you got some more for me? More skewers?
No, I want to continue. Rajkumar, we have Mario Ali Bera here. So we have to continue. I think we are ordering dinner for everyone. And we are going to continue this discussion for next 3 hours.
Good.
What I
Can you order
wanted
some?
to ask you.
Can you order some dinner for me?
Yes, absolutely, because we are continuing for next 3-4 hours until I because you have not your master. I'm going to name you Alexananda, who is Hankey, going to Hankey Dory. You are master of answering questions. You have so much knowledge. But
I think I'm a master of admitting that I can't answer questions when I can't answer them.
So you haven't said that yet.
Some dinner here too for my family. For us too.
Okay.
Thank you, Rekha.
Everybody gets dinner. Everybody gets dinner, but
So order for 5 of us.